As a Formula One CEO, I lead hundreds of people in dozens of departments. But I'm not the only one making decisions. Getting the right information from our data is critical to the entire team. That's why we rely on a platform like Alteryx. It gives us the insights we need to work smarter and think faster, on and off the track. From logistics and operations to our financial systems, Alteryx makes it easy for everyone to understand analytics. We all know we need to see around the corners. One of the smartest moves you can make as a CEO is empowering all your employees. So when people ask me, how do I make my decisions? I tell them, I don't. They do.
Hi everyone, so my name's Abby Gilbertson. I'm a technical analyst in the commercial technology team at McLaren. So what does that mean? The commercial technology team, we're responsible for integrating our technical partners across the race team, saving time and money and just shaving precious seconds off of all of our processes. And we can't go racing without our partners, so it's a pretty important job. So you probably know McLaren from Formula One. We've got 60 years of racing history, and we celebrated our 60th birthday over the Monza weekend a couple of weeks ago. Hopefully some of you saw our P2 with Lando Norris in Singapore last weekend. But we were the first team to place sensors on our car. We were the first F1 team to harness telemetry, which is the wireless transfer of data between the car and the pit lane while the car is out on the track. And we were one of the first teams to use a carbon composite chassis, which everyone uses now. But F1 isn't our only racing series. So McLaren Racing has a rich history in the IndyCar series. We won 3 Indy 500 races in 1972, 74, and 76. And in 2021, McLaren Racing took majority ownership in a pre-existing IndyCar team. So we now race as Arrow McLaren. This season, we raced 3 Indy cars, and we added a 4th one for the Indy 500. So in 2022, we joined Extreme E. So we race as the Neon McLaren Extreme E team. And it's the 4x4 off-road racing series with an ethos to promote sustainability by racing in remote terrains around the world, to raise climate change awareness as well as diversity. So all of the teams race a female and a male driver. We have 10 rounds during the season in 4 countries. So we've had the Desert Prix in Saudi Arabia, the Hydro Prix in Scotland. We've had 2 Island Prix in Sardinia, and we're going to finish the season at a Copper Prix in Chile. So the Extreme E tests our IT capabilities to the extreme. So we have minimum equipment and minimal personnel go to each of these races. Extreme E also runs a legacy program, which intends to provide social and environmental support in racing locations. Things like planting trees, rebreeding programs, monitoring water quality, and running wildfire prevention campaigns. But Extreme E isn't our only electric racing series. We also race in Formula E as the Neon McLaren Formula E team. So this is the electric single-seater world championship. We have 16 races across the season in some iconic cities around the world, including Sao Paulo, Monaco, Cape Town, Rome, Hyderabad. And we finished the season at our home Grand Prix in London. So 2023 was our first season in Formula E, and both of our electric racing series promotes our commitment to electric motorsports and our aim for sustainability. And then last but not least, we also have an esports team. So we race under McLaren Shadow, and 2018 was our esports debut. So why Shadow? The name Shadow comes from the fact that all of our esports drivers, we take them from their bedrooms as gamers, and we have them follow the exact same programs that our Formula One drivers do. So they have the same training, the same development, the same goals as all the Formula One drivers. So in 2022, Lucas Blakely won the Pro Drivers' Championship, and McLaren Shadow won the Constructors' Championship. So Formula One is the most technically advanced sport in the world. This season, we'll have raced 23 races in 19 countries. Every team has a $140 million cost cap to level the playing field between everyone. We have a 120 traveling track team and 30 people in our IT team to keep everyone connected. Data is the key to everything we do in Formula One, and not just the parts that the world watches. So before we can go racing, we have to design and manufacture the car. Can't go racing without a car. The car parts are initially created as CAD models, optimizing all of our parts for what we call downforce points. And the individual cars and a full model of the car eventually are then built into our CFD system, so our computational fluid dynamics. This is a virtual wind tunnel, and every square centimeter of the wind that flows over the car is measured and analyzed. So our CFD software is run in our HPC, so our high-performance computer. The brain of the CFD can hold 6 petabytes of car data, but a full run of the car can generate 25 petabytes of data. So a lot of the data isn't stored, most of it's discarded quite quickly. You're probably thinking, why don't we just make it bigger? Our CFD cluster is heavily regulated by the FIA, so we cannot simply just throw more memory or processors at it, and it's inspected, and every serial number is sent to the FIA. The time we're allowed to run our CFD models is also limited. So this depends on where you finish the season. So the higher up the grid you finish during the season, the less CFD time you're allowed, and the lower down, the more you're allowed. Once a part's been successfully tested in the CFD, the part is 3D printed at 60% scale and run in our real wind tunnel. So the wind tunnel time is also limited, depending on where you finish in the grid. And large amounts of data are collected from our wind tunnel and then compared to our virtual models that we've created. So the wind tunnel at the McLaren Technology Centre in Woking was opened this year. It's live, and we're looking forward to integrating it into our new build. So we've started building or designing the car for next season about 8 weeks ago. So as well as the initial design of the car at the start of the season, there's a continuous development throughout the season. So all of the parts that we develop follow this life cycle. So we get to trial a new prototype of our car every time we go racing. This season, we'll have raced about 6 different cars due to all of our upgrades. So in a typical season, we create 16,000 new parts with only a 10% carryover from one season to the next. And we'll reproduce about 60,000 parts throughout the season. Due to the upgrades that we do, over a 6-week period, about 90% of the parts will become obsolete. And as a rule, the car that starts the season finishing first, so the car that passes the line in Bahrain, they would be dead last in Abu Dhabi if they did no development to their car. So we get huge amounts of data come off the design of our car. So machining, procurement, all of our quality checks, the servicing that we do. We use lasers, ultrasound machines, scanners, modeling to check the quality of all of our finished parts. So by the time a car gets to the track, it will have over 17 different data sources detailing its journey into the car. So we use Alteryx to check our lifting and servicing criteria throughout the season. So the workflows are run in the lead up to every race to ensure that the components have the correct servicing applied, and any design changes have been added and any additions that needed to be made. So it's basically a safety net to ensure thousands of lift parts are being serviced correctly and design requirements are being captured. So to manually check all of these parts for the 2023 season would take about 25 hours, and then you would be introducing human error, which reduces our accuracy. And when we run this in Alteryx, it takes seconds, and we can run it as many times as we want throughout the season. We also use Alteryx to review the servicing history of all of our parts, so we can identify failure trends and work out and predict any future failures. So that's the data we collect and analyze during the development of the car, but what data do we collect during a race weekend? So the race car is the most advanced computer we take to the track. During a practice session on a Friday, it has 600 sensors placed on it, measuring over 100,000 parameters. These include tire pressure, fuel capacity, suspension ride height, gearbox changes, and the telemetries can even produce data on the amount of G-force that the drivers are feeling as they go around a corner. Then during qualifying and the race on a Saturday and Sunday, the number of sensors is reduced to 300 to save weight and remove sensors that we don't need information from anymore. So the data comes back to the garage at 2 megabits per second, And some parameters are measured once a lap. Others come off at 100 kilobits per second. So every second, 100,000 data points are coming back into the garage. So when the car returns to the garage between sessions, we also plug it in to make sure we've not missed any data points as the car's been traveling around the track. So every race weekend, we collect 1.5 terabits of data from each car. So the sensing telemetry from the car is streamed directly back into the garage and into the team. So usually on the pit wall, which you can see in this picture, you will see our team principal, our race director, our head of strategy, and sometimes Zach Brown, our CEO, will give his opinions as well. Inside the garage, which is behind the photographer of this picture, the engineer battle station consists of an engineer for each driver, a reliability performance engineer for each driver, and then team members that are looking at tyre wear and strategy. But we can't crunch all of that data that comes off the car at the track, and we wouldn't be very successful if we just had the people that we have at the track. So there's people sitting back at the MTC that are needed to put their expertise and decision making, and so all of that data comes back live to the MTC. So you've probably all seen the pit wall before, but welcome to mission control. This is at the MTC. It has 32 people, and each side of the room is focused on one driver. So one side will be looking at Lando, one side will be looking at Oscar. Each team member has a headset to hear live comms coming from the race, and they're being fed live sensor data from the track. So on practice and qualifying days on a Friday and Saturday, mission control is made up of strategists, aerodynamicists, reliability engineers. But on race day, on a Sunday, the car configuration has been locked, so we can't make any changes to it. So we don't need people like aerodynamicists and reliability engineers anymore. So we have volunteers come in from around the team, and they go in and they'll listen to other teams' radios. And they'll make notes on decisions and any comms that happen between the drivers and their teams. So occasionally you'll hear the drivers on the radio moaning about tyre degradation, and it'll sound very dramatic. And they're basically just trying to throw off the other teams. They're trying to pull them into the pit lanes. So our volunteers are listening out for code words and certain phrases to try and figure out what's real and what's false. This is a big area that we're looking at AI and machine learning to see if we can help train systems to look out for those certain words and phrases rather than having real people in there. So as well as collecting data live from the car at the track, we also run simulators constantly throughout the race weekend. So during a race week leading up to the race, we run 300 million simulations to test every possible scenario. And the latency back to Woking is about 200 milliseconds on average, depending on the race location. So we'll get an email every week telling us what the latency is. So an F1 car moves around 12 meters per second. So in 200 milliseconds, they can move quite far. So all the latency has to be programmed into our software and to be able to know that the car is accurately placed on the track in those simulations. So the main hub of data during a race weekend is the MTC and mission control. So all decisions that you see made on the track are coming from the MTC. So the decisions to pit the car and all of the strategy decisions are being decided at the MTC and fed back to the engineers at the track. A decision to pit the car, tell the drivers, tell the pit crew, and make a decision on what tyres we're going to use can be as little as 3 seconds. So you'll have 3 seconds to see the safety car come out and determine if we're in the right position on the track. And if we get it wrong, we could be at the back of the track and the race can be over for us. So for races such as when we were in the Netherlands and the weather was really bad, we might want to run extra simulations to test different scenarios. For these scenarios, we burst into the cloud for extra storage and computing power. So we have a mixture of public and hybrid cloud services. So how do we do this? We take 2 IT engineers to every track, and the IT setup is primarily there for driver safety, making sure we can see everything we need to see on the car. If the IT equipment doesn't start and we can't see both cars and prove to the FIA that all the systems are running, then we can't go racing and we can't release the cars onto the track. So we have 2 tons of IT equipment that goes to every race. This includes telemetry servers, strategy servers, simulations, weather servers. And the IT equipment can operate in some extreme temperatures. So in Singapore last weekend, it could be up to 40 degrees. And this pretty much breaks every warranty we have on all of our IT equipment. So we have 140 terabytes of storage, 4.5 terabytes of memory. And on an average weekend, we can read and write over 12 terabytes of data. So how does all this data help us on a race weekend? This is decision-making at the greatest point of knowledge. There are so many factors contributing to the decisions that are made during a race weekend, and all of these rely on data. So as well as the sensor data that's being collected from the car during practice, qualifying, and the race, there's a lot of live data that's being processed at the factory. So as I previously mentioned, there's virtual simulations being run for every possible scenario over the race weekend. But we also have a driver that's sitting in our simulation, in our simulator in the factory over the weekend to run specific scenarios for us. We also use historic data for tracks that we've previously raced at. And this is compared to live data to determine how we're doing compared to reverse results, what strategies we're using that we have used differently in the past. For new tracks, so when we race in Las Vegas this year, we'll profile the corners and find similar characteristics to simulate from our historic data from other tracks. This will include aerodynamic modeling and all of our CFD data. We also get live weather data and predictions from the Met Office, and then you'll see some of the guys just stick their hand out the pit wall just to check. We also get information from the drivers about the track conditions, so what the weather's like on the track and how the tires are doing. So while everyone at the track and at the MTC can hear the comms coming from the driver, only one person's allowed to talk to the driver at the track. So in the pitch, that's Jose, he's Lando's engineer, and he'll be the only person that you can hear talking to Lando over a race weekend. And all of that data, analysis, communication, hard work from the team culminates in moments like this. And that's why we go racing. So as you can tell, racing is the heart of everything we do. And there are so many supporting functions back at the MTC to help us do that. And we use Alteryx across our entire team. So we use it in finance for all of our payroll and cost cap analysis. We use it in sustainability to analyze all of our carbon footprint data, our travel data for all the race teams, and then creating our sustainability reports every year. We're also using Alteryx at the moment to migrate our fan data from SAP to Salesforce, and we're using it to clean and reorganize all of our data before it gets moved. We also collaborate with Alteryx by looking to the future, and this year we hosted their student datathon. So we had groups of students come into the MTC and race each other using real data from one of our race weekends and using Alteryx. They got some pretty cool prizes at the end of it. So when I started at McLaren, I'd never used Alteryx before, as most of the team had. But Alteryx is always willing to help us. Their training is amazing, and all of the people that we work with are really helpful. So they're always willing to help us with new use cases, and when we start a new use case, the teams will come into their training sessions with real data, and they'll come into the meeting and they'll be shown how to do it. Not only how to use Alteryx and just given a generic scenario, but they'll come out of it not only with knowledge, but also with a solution. Thank you very much. I'll be around if anyone's got any questions.